In this video, what we're going to do is go over Chapter 10, Managing Employees' Performance. Now, this is what I would be doing as far as the lecture on Monday. We're just going to do it by video like this. So we're looking at Chapter 10. Hopefully everybody got it read and went through it, first of all. And we're talking about performance management. Now, the whole idea behind performance management is to make sure that people understand what they're supposed to be doing and they are getting feedback as far as how well they're doing. Are they meeting all of their goals and things like that? It requires that you know what it is that's desired as far as the outputs and the goals and things like that, and whether they're actually doing it, okay? The benefits of it is, first of all, people know that they're valued or not, and this helps make people see that they are valued. It gets the communication going between the employee and the managers and things, and it really does help people understand what is it that they're supposed to be doing and how. Now, the steps in the performance management process. First of all, the company has to know where it is it's trying to go. What are the objectives as far as the organization is concerned, so it can feed down to the various departments, and the employees can go ahead and set their goals and things that they're supposed to be doing. Throughout the time that the person is doing their tasks, you need to provide support and ongoing performance discussions, a consistent type of coaching that's necessary. As a manager, I used to have weekly one-on-ones with all of the employees that reported to me to make sure that I understood what they were doing and what kind of challenges they were running into, what kind of things I needed to help them with, and also to let them know, okay, well, this is where you stand as far as the organization and your job is concerned. Then at some point in time, you do an evaluation of their performance. Was it good? Was it bad? What are some areas that went well? What are some areas that could have improvement? That sort of thing. Then what you do is you need to make sure that you're identifying any kind of improvements and successes. You want to make sure that people know what it is that they're doing right so that they can repeat those behaviors, and make sure that people are aware of the consequences of the performance results. In other words, you've done these things very well. Here are the rewards that go along with it. Here are the areas that need to be improved, and here are the things that need to happen. And it's basically a looping type of thing. You just continue that on a consistent basis. There's a strategic purpose. The whole idea is behind it is to make sure that the business is meeting its goals and the things that are necessary. It provides information for day-to-day decisions, and a lot of times the performance reviews are also used for pay increases and various things like that. And it's also to help people as far as their development is concerned in the current job and then also for the future. Now, you need to make sure that you have performance measures of some kind that are valid and reliable. Okay, they're valid. In other words, it's measuring what it's supposed to measure, and then it has to be reliable. In other words, you get the same thing over and over and over again. You need to make sure that it also fits with the strategy of the organization, and it is acceptable. In other words, people can understand what the process is and what it is that they're trying to do. Now, there are different ways of doing this, okay? Now, one of the ways is basically ranking. In other words, you're ranking people from, my top performer down to my bottom performer and that sort of thing. You can have that forced distribution method or paired comparison. Now, forced distribution and ranking, I'm not a big proponent of that. Jack Welch, who was the CEO of General Electric for 20 years, had a particular process where he said we have A, B, and C players, okay? Your top 20% are the A players, and they're the ones that you want to make sure that you reward for what's going on. They're the ones that are really making a difference and things like that. Your B players are the ones that are kind of the heart of the organization. They're not your best people, but the thing is, they're doing a lot of the work and things. And what you need to do is do everything you can to help those B players become A players. And then you have your C players, okay? C players are supposed to be fired. He said that basically any company basically has 20% A players, 70% B players, and 10% C players. And what he says in there is, what you have to do is you have to get rid of the C players. You have to kick them out. And so what was happening was they were having a force ranking system. If you had 10 people, that meant that one of those people once a year had to be fired because they weren't doing the job. That's really kind of difficult to do. And so this actually created a lot of consternation within the organization. There was competition between employees as far as whether they're going to be A, B, or C players. And nobody wanted to be a C player. And so there was a lot of competition where people were withholding information. They were sabotaging other folks. It was some real issues that went along with that. So that's an example of that whole idea of ranking. Okay. Now, you also have situations of graphic rating scales, where you have a list of traits and you provide a rate for each of those things. So for example, this might be an example of a graphic rating scale where here's the areas of performance, okay, computer skills and phone skills and this sort of thing. And was it unsatisfactory, meets or exceeds expectations? Now, there's a lot of problems with that. In other words, first of all, are these some of the things that really matter as far as the job is concerned? Then, what do you mean? What's the difference between meeting and exceeding expectations? How can you define that? How can you make sure that the person is clear as far as what those differences are? I have a real problem with this because it can get real loosey-goosey. I had one manager one time. We had rating scales of 1 to 5. 1 was outstanding, 5 was terrible. All right. And he said, nobody gets a 1. That means they're perfect. The only person who's perfect is Jesus. So nobody got, one of the highest ranking. Another manager that I worked for when I first started working at Hallmark was going through, okay, here's what the rating scale is, and it goes from 1 to 5 and things like that. But don't even think about getting a 1 or 2 because that goes to managers like me. I was thinking, why am I even taking this job? And so when you get things like this, you can get some real issues as far as, well, what are the differences between those things? So that's an example of the graphic rating scale. Then you have more of a critical incident and BARS method, particularly BARS. BARS is the behaviorally anchored rating system, where you're basically saying, okay, here are the behaviors that are necessary in the job, and here's how we define whether you did those things well or not. So for example, here is an example of a BARS situation. This is actually coming from Marist College. All right. Some of their administrative folks. And one of the things that they have done is they said, okay, what does exceptional mean? And they describe what exceptional is. Well, what is very effective? And they describe that. So they have a little bit better understanding as far as what's the differences between exceptional, very effective, and effective. Then what they do is they say, okay, what are the things we're looking for? So focus on results. Then what they do is they identify what are the behaviors that are necessary. What do people have to do as far as focusing on results? So for example, accomplishes expected workload and achieves a targeted planned outcomes and results in support of the college. Okay. Plans, prioritizes, and organizes work effectively. Okay. And so it gives you some of these behaviors that are necessary. Then what you can do is you rate those folks based on the definitions up here. So this is a little bit better as far as I'm concerned, because it does get into the behaviors. People can know more about what they're supposed to do as far as some of these things are concerned. I still have a problem with some of it being very subjective. In other words, quality and reliability. Well, is that really necessary in that particular job? At what level? Job knowledge and competencies. At what level are we talking about here that is necessary? So there's still some problems with it, but this is better than just the ranking system, and it's better than just the system where you're looking at, okay, so what were the traits that were necessary? All right. So that's the BARS. Behavioral observation scale, that's kind of like BARS, okay? Behavior modification, all you're doing is you're saying, okay, so what is it that you're doing? What is it that you need to do differently? Then you get into the idea of MBO, management by objectives. Let me go back here. I need to go back one. Management by objectives. The whole idea by management by objectives is you have a series of goals to meet. Did you meet them? The goals for the overall organization are set. And then what happens is those roll down through the organization. The whole idea behind this is everybody is working towards the mission and the things that the overall organization is trying to achieve. And you are judged on, did you meet those goals? Now, there's some issues that go along with this also. When I was in Hallmark, I had a manager who we sat down at the beginning of the year and we set the goals for me and everything. And there were some projects that I was supposed to be working on. Well, during the year, several of those projects were canceled, not because of me or anything like that, just organizationally, they were canceled. When we sat down for my performance review, I was downgraded because I didn't complete those projects. I said, wait a minute, those things are canceled. He said, I don't care. You had a goal on this, you didn't complete it. He was a bad manager. And so the MBO process can be very, very beneficial as long as if there are changes in the organization, if there are changes in the needs, those things are reflected in the performance review. My favorite is the 360. The 360 performance review is where you step back and you gather information and feedback from everyone around you, from your manager, the people that report to you, your peers, your customers, everybody around. You collect the information on that as far as what did the person do? Not just were they good or bad, but what did the person do? You actually get stories and things like that as far as what the person did as far as their performance is concerned. What you do is you consolidate that and then feed that back to the employee. When I was at Marion, that was the system that we went to. If you're going to do a 360 performance review, okay, one of the things you want to do is make sure that you're clear as far as who's going to be collecting the information, who they're getting the information from, what information is going to be necessary, and then you can consolidate that to get an overall view as far as what that person's performance was. My boss never really knew everything that I was doing. I worked quite a bit on my own. And I had to let her know as far as the projects that I was doing and the classes I was teaching and various things like that. And so I would, after each of my projects and things, I would solicit information as far as, okay, so what was beneficial? How did I help you achieve your goals? So in other words, I would ask them a series of questions. I would get that information. I would collect that throughout the year. Then at the end of the year, I would summarize that, give that to my boss. My boss would also talk to some of the folks and gather information and then write the performance review. And this is what the performance review looked like. My final performance review when I was at Marion Labs, where it was just text as far as here are the things that George did, and here are the things that his skills were in, some of the things that were happening as far as the organization was concerned, and then overall this. If you notice, there's not a grade, okay, or an overall number or something like that. Basically, it was a pass-fail type of system. You were either meeting the goals or you were not. And so in a situation like this, this gives you much better feedback as far as what are the things you're doing well, what are some areas for improvement. Now in this, I also would pull together all of my accomplishments to show here are the things that I had done. So for example, all the various classes that I had been doing, things that I had created. Okay, we got into the idea of satellite programs, bringing in stuff that was live via satellite. I was facilitating the president's meetings when the company was going through the merger, various other facilitation areas, pulled together and developed various other special classes that were necessary for the organization throughout the year. Did quite a bit as far as technology was concerned, as far as creating and keeping up the intranet site that we had, my personal development, going to various conferences, speaking at various conferences and things like this, and then some of the feedback that I was given. So my personal preference is that whole idea of the 360-degree performance review. I feel that those are really the best way as far as helping people understand what is it that you're doing well, what are some areas for improvement. Now, in any kind of rating situation or performance management situation, you can have some rating errors. In other words, there may be a contrast error. You have two people, and this person is outstanding. I mean, they just blow everything away. And you're comparing this person to what it is that they do. And you might downgrade this second person here because this person is so great. That's a contrast error. You want to be aware of that and stay away from it, because if that second person was really achieving what it was that they needed to do, they shouldn't be downgraded. You have other errors such as distribution, leniency, where you get leniency and strictness and that sort of thing. Rater bias. In other words, I may have a bias against a particular person because I liked them or I didn't like them or whatever it was. That can impact the performance review that they're getting. And some of the other errors, similar to me or contrasting errors. The halo error. In other words, you are overrating somebody because of one trait or one quality, and then underrating someone because of one poor quality. So you have some real issues with that. What you have to think about is what you can do to reduce those errors. Training is going to be necessary, making sure that people understand how do you actually do these ratings. You also have to make sure that the system is in place so that people can do them effectively. And it says here we go again with data analytics. Okay, we have to make sure that we have the data analytics that are necessary. Calibration meetings can be used to reduce some of the politics that gets in the way. Folks, there is a situation where you have politics throughout the organization, and it can impact a person's performance review. You have to be able to take some of those politics issues out. You want to make sure that you're sitting down and scheduling the feedback with the person so that they know what it is that they're doing. They know what they're supposed to bring, how they are supposed to interact, and how they're to participate in that meeting. The manager needs to make sure that the employee knows, here's the information I want you to bring, and here's what we're going to be talking about. And you set up a time and a place where you're away from everything else. As a manager, don't do it in your office. Go to a conference room or something like that, something that's more neutral territory where people can feel much more comfortable as far as the performance review is concerned. Now, one of the things that I always did as a manager was we had a situation where it was a yearly performance review. Well, I don't like just getting feedback yearly. I always had weekly one-on-ones with folks. Then quarterly, we would do kind of a test type of performance review. I would ask the person to fill out the forms as they would fill it out for themselves. And then I would fill out what it is that I saw. And then we would compare notes. And we would do that quarterly. Now, this is not something that was sent to their permanent HR file. This was just kept in my working files. But I wanted people to know at any point in time, how do you stand as far as your performance is concerned? What are some things that need to be improved? What are some things that you need to continue to do? And so we did that quarterly, so that what happened is at the end of the year, we would do the same thing. But this would be the final one. They would fill it out. I would fill it out. We would compare notes. Anything that I felt what I had gotten wrong or needed to be added because of the person's feedback to me, I would then add and then do the final one. What happens then is people need to, after you get your final review and everything's put together, you need to make sure that the person signs it. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that they agree with it. In other words, maybe the person was not doing very well. They didn't have a very good performance review and they don't want to sign. All right, because they say, well, I disagree with that. Well, that's fine. Signing it doesn't mean that you agree with it. Signing it means that you have read it and you understand it. If you disagree with it, you can attach other information to that performance review to be sent to the permanent files in HR. But signing it only says that you have read it. And so you put together the performance review, you go through it, you get your final copy, you make sure that everybody signs it. In that feedback session, there's different ways of going about it. You can do the tell and sell. In other words, okay, well, here's what your rating is, and here's why I did it that way. You're doing all of the talking. Or you can do a tell and listen approach. In other words, okay, well, here's the rating, here's what the performance review is, and then you step back and listen to the person, okay? Or you can work on it together. I always did it as a problem-solving approach. In other words, okay, you fill it out, I'll fill it out, we'll compare notes, we'll see what it is that needs to be changed for the final one. Because a lot of times there were things that I needed to add that I've forgotten about. If you do have performance problems, the main thing that I always thought about was, is it a can't do or is it a won't do situation? Is that there's a performance issue that's going on, the person is not meeting the goals. Is it because they cannot do it, they don't know how, or they don't have the tools? Or is it because they are choosing not to? Two different approaches. If it's a can't do situation, that's my problem as the manager, because I haven't made sure that they had the training and the tools that were necessary. If it's a won't do, that's their problem. They have to choose what it is that they're going to do as far as the job is concerned. And this talks about if you are having some performance problems, what can you do as far as diagnosing what can be done differently going forward. You also have to make sure that you're following the laws that go along with this. In other words, if you're doing things unethical or something that shouldn't be done, you could be sued for discrimination or unjust dismissal. Anytime you have performance management issues, you have to make sure that everything has been set up based on job analyses. We've talked about this before as far as the job analysis and the reason for it and the need for it. You need to make sure that you're evaluating folks based on behaviors, what they have done, not traits, what they are. Always focus it on behaviors, what it is that they have done. It's really good also to get multiple raters. The reason is because two people can see things. One seed is outstanding, another seed is very good. So what are the differences there? See if they can iron that out. Another issue as far as performance management is concerned is the idea of electronic monitoring. There's been some pushback as far as electronic monitoring because of privacy. For example, let's say you're in a call center. Call centers, people who are working call centers are constantly being monitored. In other words, there's going to be a supervisor who has access to hear what each person is doing. They can click in and be able to hear it, but you don't know it. If you're on the other end of the phone, you don't know it. They can click in and hear what it is that's going on. There's also electronic monitoring as far as what it is that people are actually doing on their computers. In other words, are they staying focused as far as the job is concerned, or are they playing Angry Birds? All right. So there could be some issues as far as electronic monitoring that come into play. These are some of the key points from the chapter. All right. We'll talk more about it when we get back together.